third hour, 8 o'clock hour. We start at 6 a.m. each Thursday morning. Politics and Grits with Kevin Peterson, where we're talking about the news that is relevant to the city's African American community. Occasionally we delve into national politics and international politics. We want to do that more, but in these recent months we've been really sort of immersed in what's happening in terms of social justice, in terms of our politics in the city, in terms of our social and economic position in the city. We've been focused mostly in Boston and around Boston. And just the last hour, you just heard about what's at stake in terms of redistricting on the city council level, as the Boston City Council is in the midst of a very rushed process in developing city council districts across the city that reflect the demography and the diversity of the city. It's very, very important because the sort of the thumb that sticks out in some ways is this development of a new monochromatic white neighborhood, the Seaport District, in the city of Boston. It's developed over the last 10 years. And when the census count came out the last a year ago, we realized that the district in which the Seaport is located is about 20,000 persons over what it should be, which creates an incredible disequilibrium, because that 20,000 overage is mostly white people and people of extraordinarily possessive means. They're very, very rich people. There are no single-family homes that we know of in the Seaport District. All condos that cost, or living arrangements that cost at least, they start at about $1 million or $2 million for 2 or 3 bedroom condos, and that price soars up to $10 million. So the net worth and the net wealth of the city in some ways is concentrated in this community, which was created over the last decade or so. And it's become problematic for city councilors as we think about how to redistribute political and civic power across the city. We're going to come back to that. Former City Councilor Charles Yancey, who was on the last hour, said he will come back to talk with us about how he's seeing this process move forward. He's offered his assistance to any of the city councilors who might need the insight that he has over 40 years of looking at redistricting in the city of Boston. And we're going to shift a little bit back to our issue of reparations in the city of Boston. As I've aforementioned, the city of Boston's in the midst of considering a race commission to look at reparations in the city of Boston. It's that consideration is in process within the Boston City Council as we speak, and we're looking for an opportunity for that to come out of committee so that the city can respond to it. City residents can speak to it in support for modification, so that this commission becomes real. All this comes on the backdrop of a Boston City Council apology for its complicity in the slave trade this past June. A historic commitment by this Boston City Council. The mayor joined in. The city officially apologizes for its role in the slave trade and anti-black bias and behavior perpetuated by the city of Boston. So that is very, very real. Symbolically, very, very extraordinary and important. So we continue to focus on this issue of reparations on this coming Saturday, the 24th of September. We're meeting in Roxbury at the Nubian Square Public Library for a community gathering around reparations. What should it look like, and what form? How do we talk about reparations in terms of repair? How do we talk about it in terms of reconciliation? Creating what may be the beloved community, as Dr. King would say. So we're taking a scan, even as we look internally in Boston, we're taking a scan at other cities and activists from across the country around what reparations look like and how they're organizing and developing around the issue. As a learning opportunity here in Boston, but also as a gesture of fidelity to our other communities across the city. This morning we have two guests who we're returning back to Philadelphia. We had a guest from Philadelphia last week from in Cobra, Philly. This morning we have two guests that we want to explore this issue around reparations a little more. They're functioning in unity with in Cobra, I'm sure, but they're also sort of taking a different angle at reparations in the city of Philadelphia. Lucy Duncan is one of our guests, and she's going to talk about her role in terms of reparations as she's engaging with the city government in Philadelphia. So I want to talk to her about what she's doing in terms of reparations in Philadelphia. And then our second guest, we'll have him on at the same time, is Gabbreell James, who's a member of the Green Street Reparations Committee. That is a group associated with the Quaker community in Philadelphia, and they've initiated a process already in terms of addressing repair by creating a fund, I believe of $500,000, $500,000 to support the Black community in Philadelphia in relation to the legacy of slavery in that city. Let's start first with Ms. Duncan, Lucy Duncan. Good morning. Glad that you're on. How are you doing? And let's talk about what you're doing in Philadelphia. Good morning again.
Good morning. I'm actually having trouble hearing you.
Okay.
So good morning. It's great to be here, but I barely can hear you.
So we'll try to fix the hearing problem, the audio. You're not hearing us too well. How about now? Is that a little better?
No, I still can't hear you.
Still can't hear me well. Well,
I could hear you when I was first on, but now you're very faint.
Okay. Well, we're trying to make some adjustments there. Just tell us let's start with this basic, tell us who you are and what you're doing in the city of Philadelphia around reparations as we make these audio adjustments.
I'm Lucy Duncan. I'm the co-chair of the Mayor's Commission for Faith-Based and Interfaith Affairs that's directed by the fabulous Reverend Naomi Washington Leapart. And I also have been, I was a originating member of Green Street Quaker Meetings Reparations Committee, which Gabbreell James will talk about more, but it was it came about a couple of years ago, and in June of 2021, the meeting budgeted $500,000 towards reparations over 10 years. And the mayor's, and sort of inspired by that, which was a long process, the Mayor's Commission decided to focus on reparations and is working with congregations to try and engage 100 white majority congregations in sincere reparations work, and held accountable to small Black congregations and grassroots organizations and supporting them. And the vision of this is pretty massive wealth redistribution in the city of Philadelphia, using the faith community as a vehicle. And the way that we're doing this, we had a very powerful revival in June for Juneteenth that brought many faith leaders from many traditions together to talk about the case for reparations. Talked about the case for reparations, particularly in Philadelphia, to have both confession and demands from white and black participants in these different faiths. And then we included some case studies, including Green Street, in that. And then we've been wanting to do a course to really prepare faith leaders in the city to understand reparations and to be able to move a campaign in their own congregation. And so in January 9th through 11th, the Truth Telling Project, for which I am the Truth and Reparations Education Fellow, a national organization that has a grassroots reparations campaign, is coming to town to do their really amazing course for 3 days. And then on the fourth day, we're going to be doing a day of organizing with these congregations and coaching them through making a plan of action for implementing reparations within their congregation. And then we'll hold monthly meetings afterwards to ensure that they continue that work. We're inviting pods of 3 to 5 people for that. And really feel like the faith community in particular is a great, given the values and the espoused values, and just the fact that Philadelphia is a majority black city, that this just makes a lot of sense in terms of doing this in Philadelphia.
So I want to make sure you can hear me well now. Do we make the adjustment? You can hear me fine?
You're still pretty faint. I can almost hear you.
Okay. Well, let me just ask this question. Where does the model come from in terms of what you're doing, in terms of linking the churches with action that comes out of City Hall and commitment from City Hall? Is there a model, or did you create it there in Philly?
I don't think there's a model. I think we're creating the model. And the Truth Telling Project is really interested in place-based organizing, and so they have one fellow is in Savannah, and I'm in Philadelphia, and really supporting a movement so that reparations becomes possible, like HR 40, with people really understanding that they can do this with each other, that they can, my experience is that reparations in racial justice work releases, unbinds bound energy, and really is like, we have look at our resources. We can make a difference. That was definitely true in Green Street, and let's move that forward. And Green Street was really inspired by the Quaker legacy of complicity with slavery. Quakers were inhabited Barbados, and there were thousands of slaveholders there. And William Penn was the first enslaver and trader in human bondage in Philadelphia. So there's a legacy here that Quakers have a particular role in ameliorating and offering repair for. So that's really like the root of what we're trying to do. And really Green Street sort of was the inspiration, being able to figure out how to do that there. And then figuring that we could really invite the whole city, the metro region, to engage in this and really make a huge impact, I think.
Now, the model that you're constructing, you're hearing me better now, I hope.
A little better, yeah.
A little better, okay. So the model that you're constructing brings together white inner city churches, or white inner city and suburban churches, along with black churches, with the goal of education and around reparations, and pushing forward towards a reparations solution on a city level. Have I captured that correctly?
Yes. So there's a couple of different aspects.
Okay.
So yes, we are inviting Metro Philadelphia, so white city congregations and white suburban congregations, because there's complicity everywhere.
Yes.
To participate, and the goal is to release the resources that are in these faith communities. And in 1969, some members the SNCC and Black Panthers got together and made a call for reparations to faith communities, which has not been responded to, and actually Quakers were invited to respond by Muhammad Kenyatta, who was leading the coalition in Philadelphia, made a demand of $5 million of reparations from Quakers, and only ended up receiving $5,000. And he thought that Quakers would be an easy win, and we were not. So we have a legacy in that way. So the vision is both this like, let's use our own resources to fuel this movement, and then there's also efforts at the city level. There's Philadelphia has some of the most groundbreaking legislation already on the books called the Slavery Disclosure Act, which asks vendors who do business with the city to examine their complicity with slavery and make a reparations plan. And it's not meaningfully enforced right now. And then the local and Cobra chapter, which you may have talked to them already, is working to get a city commission on reparations. So I think all of us are trying to work together to have our efforts amplify one another. And we're going to have, in January, we're going to also have a convening of all the reparationist efforts in the city, so that we can support one another and see if there's campaigns that we might want to build together.
Is there, as far as you can tell, a growing momentum within the grassroots or across the city around reparations as an issue that needs to be addressed? We saw the issue raised during the last presidential campaign in high relief. People like Cory Booker and others have talked about their support of reparations. I'm wondering, even as it's talked about more prominently and with energy on the national level, if this conversation is sinking in into municipal levels like Philadelphia. Do you have the opportunity to sort of measure any activity or interest around the issue?
I don't know if we have a way to measure it, but it seems, I mean, the only way I know is how people showing up, right? So we had a really good attendance at a revival, and many, many people, representatives from so many different faith communities presenting, but also showing up. And it just, it to me, part of the barrier towards doing this work is people having a model, having an idea that it's possible. So I think Green Street opens a lot of space because, like, well, we figured out how to do it. We're still figuring it out, but I think that is one barrier, and people like will have a knee-jerk reaction of like it's impossible. And I think that having really concrete examples is really, really elemental to getting this movement started. And we have found, in terms of participation in our efforts and in conversation with people, one of a partner, we are planning to partner with Power Interfaith, which is a big interfaith organization in the city, on promotion of this of the reparations campaign. And it seems as though people are eager for something really substantive around racial justice, and reparations just feels like an obvious thing to do. And there are many, many ways that people can offer that.
Yeah.
And so to me, it feels like we're both creating an appetite for it. We're building the movement, but we're also responding to some energetic shifts that are already there.
And we're talking to Lucy Duncan, Philadelphia, one of the leaders of the reparations movement. Lucy, I'm gonna transition in a moment over to your colleague Gabbreell, but I wanted to ask you. You mentioned earlier in your comments that you were looking to pull resources from these other congregations, direct resources, into the reparations movement. Do you mean monetary resources, or are you talking about something more expansive than that?
I think that there can be material resources.
Material.
So monetary land. I mean, many congregations have land that
Mm-hmm.
could be either, released or leased for very little money.
Mm-hmm.
So just people looking at their treasures is what Quakers would say, like look into your treasures and see how they're used. That's really what Green Street did. It's like, well, let's look at our treasure and decide if the use of this treasure is in line with our values.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to be inviting congregations to think about that and to consider what they collectively hold as a mechanism, as a means for making reparations. We're also going to be, in the course, we're going to be talking about white congregations offering reparations, but also black congregations making those demands.
Mm-hmm.
So that there's really partnership, deep partnership inside the city, in among congregations in doing this work. It's not, if white congregations doing this in a vacuum without a real sense of connection and partnership and community with the black community and black congregations doesn't make sense.
Mm-hmm. Before we go to Gabbreell, how important is apology in this whole process? Has the city committed itself to an apology, or is that important at all in this process? Have you simply moved beyond that some people would say initial stage to this type of action you're involved in now? Apology.
So, I actually think that's a really interesting question because I do not.
This is Gabbreell.
Think that Green. Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Thank you for coming on, Gabbreell. You go ahead, please.
Okay.
Thanks.
I was saying that I do not believe that Green Street has actually issued an apology.
Uh-huh.
Quakers, of course, are, hundreds of years old in Philadelphia,
Mm-hmm.
in the Northeast. But Green Street is a Hicksite meeting, which I know doesn't mean anything for anyone who's not Quaker.
Mm-hmm.
But the Green Street itself did not have enslavers in the meeting.
Mm-hmm.
But we did have a school that was segregated, and there's plenty of things that we did, and we benefited from what other people did, and maybe someone down the road, some of our money, some things that have been left to Green Street might have had
Mm-hmm.
their basis in enslaving people.
Mm-hmm.
But apology, we didn't start at apology.
Mm-hmm.
We started at kind of repair.
Mm-hmm.
Like what can we do
Mm-hmm.
in our community to make things different?
So just in terms of background for we who are listening up in Boston, how did that conversation start at Green Street? And we're talking about the Quaker community, correct? Located in the Germantown section. There's wealth within that local, I don't know if you call it a congregation, but within that faith community. How did the conversation begin? Just curious as to what sparked off this modern work that you're doing.
So it's very interesting, and I think many congregations can relate. So it started because our building, which is like 150 years old,
Mm-hmm.
Was in disrepair. It was leaking, it was flooding, it was just a lot of things were broken, the heat didn't work, our building was old and needed repair. And so we asked for a contractor to come out, and the contractor gave us this really high bill to fix everything, and many members of the meeting were like, oh my God, what are we going to do? How are we going to fix this building?
Mm-hmm.
And one member who was on trustees, which controls our money, stated that we could just pay it. And when that sunk in, a bunch of people were like, well, wait, we have money? Like, we didn't understand that the meeting had like a trust fund, that it had this money just kind of sitting in the bank. And once we understood that, our next thought for many people was, well, what are we doing? What are our good works? What are we doing with our money in the community if we had money? And so that's actually how, that was the beginning of, and then it was a long road to reparations,
Mm-hmm.
but the thought was there that we should be doing more than just making our money grow in some kind of mutual fund.
Mm-hmm. So was there a circle or a period of sort of reflection? Because I can imagine that you could have simply said, well, we're since we have this this pool. Well, I don't know how much money you have, but since we have this pool of resources, we're going to devote it to a new playground. Was there something during a conversation or some triggering moment, maybe the George Floyd moment? I'm not sure. Was there something specific that says reparations?
So this all happened before the murder of George Floyd. But so what happened was, so this is like, I'm talking like 2015, 2016 is when we decided to fix our meeting. And then I think in 2017, we did something called the spirituality of money. So at the meeting, came together and did a 6-month workshop around money. And there were 6 parts. And they were money as promise, money as relationship, money as power, money as obligation, money as investment, and money as accountability. So we just took our time as a meeting together as a group and thought about money. What does it mean? How did we get it? What can we do with it? And so after we did that, like I said, that was 6 months. After we did that, then the reparations committee was created. Again, all before the murder of George Floyd. So then we had the reparations group, right? We had this committee, this working group, and we started trying to come up with ideas of how we could do reparative justice in our community. And then the pandemic hit, right? Yeah. And we kind of laid down, like a lot of places, people kind of stopped congregating together, the city closed down, all that kind of stuff. And then the murder of George Floyd happened. And then we said, we have to do something. We have to get back together, and we have to work on doing something in our community. And that's kind of what you see now. But it took years for us to get here.
It's just so fascinating. Explain the mechanics of the project. My understanding is it's connected to housing, the reparations. I work in housing, right? So Green Street is a mostly white congregation, but we have a good amount of people of color, whether they're African American, Black from someplace else, and some people who are not Black and not white, right? Yes. So what we did was we came together and we said we want to do something. Yes. And we got the meeting so this is like Quaker speak. So basically we got the meeting to say, okay, we're willing to put $50,000 a year for 10 years of the money that we have just sitting in the bank to this work. What we asked was, give us the money and we'll figure out what to do with it, this committee, and we will figure it out with the guidance of the Black members of the meeting. So since I'm African American, I called a meeting, a separate meeting with just the African American members of the meeting. And together we said, what do we want to do with this money? What do we think is important in our community where we live and worship? And we had a bunch of different answers. We had people who said, education. We had people who said mental health. We had people who said, domestic violence. We had all these different things. And like I said, I work in housing. I've been working in housing for more than 10 years now. And I said, I hear you, but the foundation of a lot of problems that we have in our community, even violence, is housing instability. So let's try to stabilize generational wealth and stabilize our community by working around single titles, probate, wills, different things that make many times Black Americans lose their wealth, lose their money, lose their community and their support, which then makes all these other problems or can, help these other problems to develop in our community. So in the group of just the Black members of Green Street, they were like, you know what? I got a friend who lost their house behind a single title. I know someone who had to buy their mom's house from the sheriff. Everyone understood how much housing was a problem and an issue. So then we came back to Reparations Committee. I came back. There's 2 Black people on the committee. So we came back from that meeting and we said, this is what we want to do. We want to do something around housing. So then the Reparations Committee said, okay, we're going to reach out to community legal services. We're going to reach out to pro bono lawyers, and we're going to figure out a way to have them come into our neighborhood, into our community, and anyone Black in our zip code
that shows up, we're going to help them get their house in their name. We're going to help them with a will. We're going to pay for any like registration fees and different things like that, so that they can keep their wealth and pass it directly to who they want to when they pass away.
Mm-hmm. And these are exclusively black people living in Philadelphia, correct?
Black people living in Germantown.
In
So
Germantown.
19144 zip code and 19138 zip code, which are the zip codes for Germantown, which is where Green Street is located. So we decided to start in our backyard.
Can you explain the community a little bit, the demographics, and a little bit of the history? Wonder if you can give us a sense of, is it a majority?
It is a majority black neighborhood, but it's not exclusively black neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a section of Germantown which is poor. There's a section of Germantown which is definitely upper class.
Mm-hmm.
There are 2 Quaker schools in Germantown, and one of them is really exclusive and very expensive.
Mm-hmm.
There is, business corridor. It is a very beautiful section of Philadelphia with big old houses because of, think of it, the name of it. It's where the Germans lived 200 years ago in Philadelphia.
Mm-hmm.
So there's big yards, there's nice parks and playgrounds. So it's kind of like a traditionally black neighborhood now. It's been a black neighborhood for years and years. But, the houses are old, of course. So there is also the problem with repair and blight, and how do people hold on to their houses? Philly is gentrifying, taxes are going up, and people can't necessarily sustain everything they need in the community to keep their house and their wealth for their family.
Just curious a little bit. Germantown became a majority black community around what time? 60s or the 70s? Just curious as to the generational presence there in of black people in Germantown.
Lucy, do you know the answer to that, when Germantown became black? Because I don't know. I would have said in the 60s.
I don't know. Maybe even a little earlier. I'm not sure. But it's been historically black for decades, but I don't know exactly when.
Yeah. Well, let me ask both of you just a general question. What advice would you give to cities like Boston or others who are at the very onset of thinking about reparations on a community level, Gabbreell, or on the city or structural level, Lucy? Individually, what advice would you give if asked about how do you start up a engaging and potentially robust reparation campaign? Lucy, we'll start with you.
Well, I would say that experimentation and belief that it's possible is really important. And I don't know that the Mayor's Commission campaign would be possible without the example of Germantown. Of Green Street. Like that isn't a really. I think that people have a really hard time if they don't have a model. Mm-hmm. And the sort of like, oh, how do you do it? What do you actually do? It really answers some questions. It doesn't mean that other people won't do it differently. But then I also think that setting up a structure for people to work together across communities, which is what we're doing with this course and long term, and also like not making sure people are inspired and understand what it is. So our revival was really really beautiful. It didn't minimize the harms. It didn't minimize the need. I mean, there was grief expressed for the legacies of anti-blackness, but it also lifted people up and made you feel like things are really possible, and that it's a spiritual commitment that we can do this. So it's practically possible, and then spiritually. So I would say, like, begin, experiment, and then create the relationships and community that can hold the work across the city.
Gabbreell James?
I would say honesty. Like, honestly, look at your congregation. Mm-hmm. Honestly, look at yourself, where you live, where you go to school, where you work, the wealth that your parents and grandparents had that they passed down to you, paying for your college or helping you with the down payment for your home. I feel like people want to separate themselves from American history.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there has to be an honest examination of, okay, like I said, Green Street is old, we have all this land, we have a school, and we just need to be honest about who was able to access the resources and who wasn't, and what was that based on. And then I feel like once you, because it doesn't matter where you are in the United States, there was racism involved in the land that you have, in the money that you have. There was racism involved. So once you are honest about that, then I think the next step is, what does that mean? What do we need to do to try to correct what has happened or what our ancestors did that I got with no benefit, right? Like, I didn't do anything to, I mean, as a person, as a white person, as a rich person, as someone who was established in America. What did you do to get those things? You see what I'm saying? And it doesn't matter how long your family has been here. Because if you're white, you benefit from white supremacy. You benefit from racism and racial prejudice in the United States. Mm-hmm. So once people are honest about that, and then I think there is, and we're talking about faith communities, there is, what am I supposed to do? What would be my good works? What does God feel like I should be doing to correct the wrongs that I can honestly see have happened in the past and that I have benefited from?
This is Politics and Grits, Boston Praise Radio in Boston. We're talking to Lucy Duncan and Gabbreell. I'm sorry, Gabbreell James. Sorry about that. Gabbreell James. In this very, very intriguing conversation. Just a couple more questions. We're learning so much as we prepare for a community gathering on this Saturday. Ms. James and Ms. Lucy. One other question, or maybe two. How have you dealt with any trauma that may have arisen as you present the question of reparations to white people and black people? Some response, and I characterize this as trauma, just as an example, is that some blacks that I've spoken to, even here in Boston, have said, well, I don't want to even talk about reparations. It happened before I got here. I know my family is a legacy of the slave trade, and they're aware of all that, but they just don't want to talk about it. They want to move forward in their middle class existence or upper middle class existence. I think that is a form of responding from trauma. I wonder how you might respond to that example and to the general question. Are you feeling trauma, and how does one respond to it at all? Ms. James.
I feel that when someone, a Black American, and I almost feel like I wanted to ask, like, is that person like second generation West Indian or, something like that? I feel that when a Black American is does not want to look at reparations and look at any type of wealth redistribution, there's a lack of concern for people who aren't middle class.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, or some, like, you want to look down, like, I did it, so you could do it too.
Yes.
But that's not how white supremacy works, right? There has to be a huge section that are underclass. And yes, there's always, we know in America, during slavery, there were some Black Americans who had money or had business or owned other people. So the idea that slavery wasn't that bad because I was fine because I was in Connecticut and I had a shipping business doesn't make any sense. You know what I mean? And I feel like that's the conversation I would want to have with other African Americans who don't want to talk about slavery, who don't want to talk about Jim Crow, and don't want to talk about reparations. Then I feel like you said, it's a trauma response, and it's a way of separating yourself from the collective of Black people in America and what the majority of Black Americans are dealing with. Not that there aren't rich Black Americans or there aren't middle class and educated Black Americans. That's not the point. The work that we did in Germantown was not about only people who were about to lose their house. They're only people who just worked at the supermarket.
Mm-hmm.
That wasn't the point. The point was Black people in this area.
Mm-hmm.
We are going to try to help and support and stabilize this community. Philadelphia has a big problem with tangled titles and with, like I said, with the gentrification. People are losing their houses to developers,
Mm-hmm.
and the communities there's lots of crime and violence here because of the instability of housing in the city of Philadelphia.
Lucy,
So,
yes, go ahead. I'm sorry.
yeah. Well, no, I'm just saying, so I can try to separate myself from it if I want to, if I'm middle class, but middle class people are still being negatively affected by what's happening to the whole of Black people.
Lucy, we didn't identify you as white. You are white, correct?
I am white, yes.
Yeah. In response to that, as you engage white people,
I mean, I think that there's a reparations group that's white that does a lot of work with white people to get them ready for reparations. And I've done this in my own personal work. Is that if you don't do the psychosocial work of understanding your legacy and dealing with the shame that's involved in that and metabolizing that, not getting stuck in it, and understanding your responsibility and the way that whiteness separates white people from their own humanity. That in this group they say that if you're ready to do reparations and you haven't done that work and you're ready to sign the check, your ancestors will come and knock the pen out of your hand. So white people need to do the work so that they're really ready to divest of whiteness, to really deeply divest of whiteness. And I think that there's a, for me personally, I understand whiteness disability is too strong, but just something that keeps me from being connected to other people, that really has given me a legacy of disconnection from other people. And I don't want that. I want to rid myself of that and be as much as possible, if it's not possible completely, and live from my spiritual center and not from my socialized self. So white people do have that work to do, and that's some of the work that we'll be doing in this course.
Gabbreell James from the Green Street Project, Lucy Duncan. I want to thank you for being on. You illuminated us so much in terms of how we in Boston should be organizing and looking at reparations in terms of grassroots, faith communities, and in terms of connection with city government. Really appreciate it. Either you want to add anything that we may have missed in the minutes that we have left? Yes.
I'd love to just say the Truth Telling Project slogan is reparations is the midpoint between truth and reconciliation. And so reparations is a way to create a relationship.
Yes.
That would be my last word. Gabbreell?
Gabbreell?
I would say I really thank you for having us on, and I'm glad that you're working on this in Boston, and good luck.
Thank you, and continue to pray for us. We'd like to stay connected, if you don't mind. We're intentional about trying to build these communities across the country, as you have been doing. Work with other groups and other national outfits. Thank you again for coming on. Please come back and visit us. We'll reach out to you. We want to update you on what's happening in Boston, particularly as we initiate these community convenings, and we look forward to a race commission being offered out of the Boston City Council pretty soon. Thank you again.
Grateful to be here. Thank you for inviting us.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and remember, there's lots of Quakers in Boston too.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so very much, both of you, for being on. We'll circle back. We appreciate it. This is Politics and Grits with Kevin Peterson. We're on every Thursday morning, 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. What a wonderful conversation with I'll call them colleagues or cohorts across the country, and there are two very dedicated individuals focusing around the reparations issue in the city of Philadelphia, the city of brotherly love, the city that was started and organized in some ways by William Penn, a Quaker, and Benjamin Franklin, one of the signers of the Declaration of Independence. Both of them invested in slavery at some point in their lives. Slave owners supporting the slaveocracy of the United States there in Philadelphia. I know that there's. I think I spoke with Lucy a little bit, Ms. Duncan, about both of those figures, Ben Franklin and William Penn, about their legacy and how they're being reacted to in these days as people from across the country are talking about renaming buildings and pulling down Confederate statues. There's a huge statue of William Penn that sits on the top of City Hall in Philadelphia. The founder of Pennsylvania, William Penn, a slave owner. What message does that send in 2022 in this era where we're looking at repair, we're looking at reconciliation? How do we look at symbols within our communities as a way of having deeper constructive conversations about race and reconciliation? We should not be confused at all that addressing symbols like Faneuil Hall in Boston, Peter Faneuil, a slave owner, addressing these issues are not the end-all, do-all. There's a misnomer even in Boston about what the Faneuil Hall project is about. And you missed the point, folks, including our brother Byron Rushing. You missed the point if you think that the issue of renaming Faneuil Hall is about inconsequential symbolism. Symbols matter, as the cross matters within Christianity, or within Christendom, as the Nazi symbol could matter within Western civilization and German culture. Symbols matter, and addressing symbols allow us to address issues within a particular community context with power and forcefulness that you otherwise couldn't do. So we dwell on this issue around Faneuil Hall, hoping that it'll be an education process. It's gone over the heads of some people, I'm sorry to say. They've missed the point exactly and absolutely. Former State Representative Byron Rushing, you missed the point as you continue to argue within your circles, within your tea parties, among your groups of elite friends on Beacon Hill and the South End. You argue in vain if you argue against the movement around changing the name of Faneuil Hall, because you missed the point. You just missed the point, and perhaps you're blind to it, or perhaps you're purposely seeking to disrail an effort that has all intentionality about bringing repair and reconciliation. The fact that Peter Faneuil, the slave owner after whom Faneuil Hall is named, the fact that he was a French Huguenot whose family was seeking relief from religious persecution in Europe, does not equate to the fact that somehow he should be absolved of any criticism or response in terms of being a slave owner. There's no moral equivalency. There's no cultural. There's no existential equivalency to the two realities. He was a slave owner. He derived his mass wealth through the transatlantic slave trade. His name should not adorn a publicly owned building. The second most visited place, tourist attraction in the nation, behind Disneyland. There are 146 businesses and shops at Faneuil Hall. None of them are black owned in a city where blacks represent more than 30% of the population. That's embarrassing. And Byron Rushing, excuse the phrasing, but you should be ashamed of yourself. You should be ashamed of yourself. by advocating a position around not changing the name based on the fact that that this man was seeking religious persecution. What he did to other humans, even in the context of 17th, 18th century political and civic reality in Boston, even in that reality where slavery was being argued against as a moral evil, as a political evil, as a civic evil, your argument holds no water. We're gonna wrap up. Dicko, if you want to make a comment as we wrap up. Sorry, we're getting to you at the last 3 minutes, but please, Dicko, you have a comment or question?
Yeah, I have a question. I just want to be very logical about this. You say that Federal Hall shouldn't be on a public building, but what about Washington, D.C. or the state of Washington? Because last time I checked, George Washington was the slave owner, and yet the people down in Washington isn't changing that district or the state. Huh? Mm-hmm. So why are we still, as black people or the politicians, still holding on the legacy of slavery? Because to me, that's still, whether they like it or not, it's still a legacy of slavery, because George Washington was a slave owner, and I don't hear anything about changing Washington, D.C. or the state of Washington. Huh? Yeah. I'm being logical here.
Yeah, you're being logical, and we'll take it up. I mean, I think we at some point we can stop changing the names of edifices or buildings or streets named after slave owners. We can stop, but it's important to make a point on some issues, particularly this issue around Faneuil Hall. We know that, for example, that Peter Faneuil did nothing to contribute to democracy at all. He was a straight-up slave owner. And so while Washington and Jefferson, we interrogate their lives, we can see that they did something in terms of democracy, which allows us to have these kind of conversations today. So I'm not absolving Washington or Jefferson in terms of their slave-owning legacy, but there are some things that we can balance. We have to wrap up another edition of Politics and Grits Thursday, September 22nd, is it? I think so. We're wrapping up, and just want to invite folks again to join us on this coming Saturday, September 24th, 10 a.m., Nubian Square Public Library. We're going to have a conversation about reparations. It's a casual one. We have some community leaders coming. We're going to have a short film on some reparations leaders. Dougherty, Professor Dougherty at Duke University. There's an interview that we all should look at. The book he's written, From Here to Equality, is an important work on reparations that we all should be paying attention to. I want to thank everybody for listening. Councilor Yancey for calling in, and everyone who just tune in. We see their comments online coming through my feeds on my text feed on my phone. We would appreciate you for listening. Continue to listen. Spread the word. Politics and Grits, WBPG LP 102.9 FM, Boston Praise Radio, Black Boston News. This is Kevin Peterson signing off. Politics and Grits. Have a great day. See you on Saturday. Bye-bye.